my childhood was really confusing because on the one hand, like I want to acknowledge like what my parents did give me, which is that like my mom's a feminist and my father is a socialist. And so if you look at me and who I ended up becoming, you can see the legacy of what my parents gave me that was positive, like the first, take your daughter to work day. Like my father brought me to a picket line, like, and like my mom, brought me up on feminism. So on one level, they were giving me a lot of the values that I have today. But due to their own trauma and dissociation, there was also a lot of abuse in my family. And there was an extreme dissonance between like what my parents were teaching me in terms of their spoken values and then what was actually going on in my family. And one of the things that was going on in my family is sexual abuse from my grandfather. And so this situation was obviously extremely confusing and painful for me. And I had no like way of making sense of it. And in many ways, it totally broke and destroyed my brain. And so, I really think like I have drawn these connections with my vegetarianism when I was a child, that like there was this like several different things were coming together. Like one, I had solidarity with animals because I, first of all, could see the animals were people. I could see that they were beings with an internal world and their own, desires and wants and things that they did not want. That was like obvious to me, as I think it is to most children. We actually learn to dissociate out of that recognition. So I could see that. And then I could therefore empathize with them. And I could see that I would not want to have those types of experiences happening to me. But I also could empathize with the experience of abject helplessness and having things that I did not want to happen to me, right? I also was like, children are quite helpless. Like when we're children, we don't have control over what's happening to us. And it's like, we may or may not luck out and get parents who have had enough therapy to process their own trauma that they are not repeating the cycle, right? And so the cycle is definitely being repeated in my context, and I had no power to change that. And I could see that the animals also had no power to change what was happening to them. And so I had this like profound solidarity, right? And then also my vegetarianism was a defiant stand in my bodily autonomy, because I was like, this is my body and I will not be eating that. And so like really drawing those lines and being like, no, in a context where I was experiencing sexual abuse and where my right to my body was extremely eroded, like my vegetarianism was this like extremely important like defiance and like stand of sovereignty of being like, I will not actually be doing that. And I'm very stubborn. And so like my family just had to accept it, because eventually they realized like I wasn't going to eat it. And like throughout my childhood, like my family eventually did accept it and allowed me to be a vegetarian. But growing up, I grew up in a small town. Like the idea of a child asserting that kind of a boundary was so offensive to so many of the adults that I came across. And very often in my childhood, like there were contexts where various adults would just not accept it and would not allow me to have like a vegetarian option. And so there was many times where I just didn't eat dinner, because I was like, well, I will not. And so like that was like a beautiful place for me to be able to take this stand of my autonomy in my body, and also like my most deeply held principles and my solidarity with the animals.